Welcome to the Real Triathlon Podcast. I'm your host, Garrick Lowen, here with Nicholas Chase and Jackson Lund.
All right, as promised, we have an outstanding episode today. Wayne Attwell, the owner, founder, main cohort, or main kahuna, big kahuna, I guess I'd say, at FastTT Bike. And Wayne, thanks so much, man. You've been an epic supporter of triathlon. I reached out to you and asked, how can I get on your product? You've been more than kind and taking care of our team. So first and foremost, thank you for being such an advocate for what we're doing and also for being on the episode. So thanks so much, buddy.
Thanks, Nick. Good to be on the episode. I have to say it's been fun working with you and getting Jackson and Mark on board, and look forward to having an exciting year this year, man.
Yeah, we're going to have some RTS athletes. Right now, myself, Jackson, Mark have kind of thrown our hat in the ring and say, we want to be on these bars. I've been on them for, I think, 2 races now, Indian Wells and Challenge Salinas at the end of last year, 2023. And it was the most comfortable and the most adjustable I've been on a front end. We came from working with 51 Speed Shop, which was a great product, just didn't have the actual unique characteristics of conformity to the arm and a little bit more aero gains. But before I get into anything else, Wayne, I would love to know about you. Give me a bit of a biography of the last few years, and maybe as to why you're so passionate about this specific project, and what credible things have you done to make sure that you're the expert?
You have to go back to my original training. I studied as an industrial designer. So that's kind of my original training, but I got involved in marketing, and my career took a path down brand marketing. So I became I had for about 15 years a brand strategy and design agency, and my skill was search engine optimization.
Oh.
So that's kind of where I was working. But at the same time, I'm kind of an avid time trialist, and I got to the stage as I got older that I needed a bit more than disc wheels and a good skin suit. So I started to look at the cockpit. And about 3 years ago, I sort of reached out to the market. I looked at what was available, and I didn't really like what I saw. So I thought, how hard could it be to design and build an aerobar? And that was the start of it, sitting around the dining room table with pieces of cardboard and sketching, and I still have the cardboard mock-up. And so we built a TT bar, primarily for me to use to go faster. And I noticed quite a few of the guys buying them were triathletes. So I listed on the website as a tri bar and a TT bar separately, and all the sales were tri bars. So I reached out to a few of the customers, and I realized we actually needed a proper tri bar. So I started to rapidly learn about triathlon. I used to be a ultra distance runner, had some knee injuries, started cycling. Can't swim to save my life, so I'll never be a triathlete. But anyway, so that's kind of how we morphed into the triathlon bar. And to be honest, we've kind of really focused entirely on triathlon. The TT side is just, it's very small. It's very restrictive in terms of design through the UCI. Okay. So triathlon is where we can be a little bit more adventurous and deliver better product for the athlete. So currently, the way it works, I basically do all the conceptual design work, all the aerodynamic theory stuff, and I have a industrial design engineer who does CAD work for me. And he's an industrial designer who majored in aerodynamics, so he has a very good feel on the aerodynamic side. Plus, we've partnered with Speed Edge in Portugal, and Bernardo and his crew are basically academics that race bikes, and their master's thesis is on aerodynamics. So we've got a very strong handle on aerodynamics. My personal sort of hobby horse is ergonomics. And so for me, the ergonomic side has been particularly, I think, valid in the tri space, where, you're spending 5 to 7 hours on a bike. And comfort is probably more important than just aero. It's got to be aero, it's got to be fast, but like at the tri bars, a lot of them are very fast but extraordinarily uncomfortable to ride. And after 30, 40 minutes, you've got to get off the bike.
Yeah,
how I got to where it is.
Let me jump in with a question real fast, because I didn't really understand the vast differences between, when you're saying TT versus triathlon, and I'm guessing the restrictions for UCI rules really limit what you can put on the front of a cockpit for a UCI legal bike. Can you touch on some of the points that are really different?
Yeah, I mean, the UCI's primary concern is safety and control. So you have not only a very strict, this year they brought in, well, sorry, 2023, they brought a new set of rules in around aerobars because of the sort of proliferation of carbon systems. And some very tight controls about how big the elbow pad can be, how deep the flares are, how wide the body can be, et cetera, et cetera. They also have rider length constraints, so you can't get the front of the saddle closer than 50 mil to the bottom bracket. And you've got a whole lot of not just bar constraints, but rider setup constraints. So it really, like our TT bar it's a compromise in order to make it fit in the rules.
Okay.
For Tri, and I think this divergence is increasing. Initially, TT is where all the sort of aero bars started, and triathlon picked up on it, and you're using TT bars. But actually, as we've started to develop and we have, future developments, the bars are very tri-specific. You cannot use our current bar and the future bar we're building. You cannot use it in time trial. It's just not legal because it just breaks the rules. But it's a much better bar. It's faster. It's more comfortable. So there's a very strong divergence to triathlon specific, and that's kind of where we've gone from a brand point of view.
Okay, great. And thank you for that. I definitely needed to hear that kind of differentiation. Now, you've never built this product before, this was something you just kind of decided this is an industry need. Was it, what really motivated you to kind of figure out, how do I work with carbon in a way that is, ergonomic? How can I, how did you figure out how to purchase, machine these things? And like, that had to be one of the hardest things.
Well, the first thing I did was I looked at the shape of my arm. I looked at how I sit on the bike. And I think the difference between probably me and a lot of other brands is I primarily come from a rider's perspective. And my objective for me personally was I want to go faster with less effort, and I want to feel comfortable. And so it's really been a athlete-driven design versus a commercial thing at all. I mean, when I started this, I had no intention to make a business. I thought if I could make a bar for me and I could cover the cost of tooling by selling a couple of bars, I'll be as happy as anything. And through the process of doing a good product, it's turned into a pretty substantial business now. A lot of the designers, I think, like I look at my industrial design guy that works with me, he's very clever and he can design beautifully, but he's got no idea about aerodynamics or how a bike fits together. And when I pull cockpits apart on some of these bikes, I just look at the engineer. I think like it's fairly obvious that an engineer did it and not a rider. Mm. So, I mean, like I'm a time trialist, but I understand the TT position, understand how hard it is to ride. I'm an ex-runner. I know what it's like to run a marathon. I've never run one after a 180K ride, but I can imagine how bad it is. And I think that's been the secret. It's not been a commercial driven thing at all. It's been an athlete. And I think the feedback from guys like you and the pros and I get a 55-year-old age grouper who weighs 90 kilograms saying he's changed his bike from being a thing of pain to something that's enjoyable to ride.
Yeah.
That you can't put a monetary value to that as a designer. It's like, that's the ultimate.
Real quick, Garrick, you're able to join us now. Thanks for coming on. You'll jump on with some questions. I know that this is a big interest level and point for you since you've been wanting to hit the wind tunnel too. But before that, Wayne, the difference between a custom, completely 3D imaged bar that you can buy in the market right now for upwards of $4,000 or $5,000 versus an adjustable comfort level bar that you've created. How do you compare the two? How has the experience been as riders have evolved and gotten on your product?
So there's really three systems in the market. The one is the sort of bottom end, which is poles and cups. And there's quite a few variations from the simple cup and a piece of aluminium that's bent through to like the new profile design, the Aero Coach, where it's a kind of, and the Zipvuka, where it's kind of a molded carbon extension. But in the end, it's still a cup and pole. Then you go to my system, which is a single full-length arm with lots of adjustability. And then you also go to the ones like this,
Watch shop, I
Speedco,
think, maybe.
No, Speedco, like the ones that are completely molded to your arm. It's fixed in one position. And so there's three different philosophies going from super adjustable to zero adjustable. When I started, the reason I built my own bar was I didn't like even a aerodynamically molded carbon two-piece system. It just didn't work. It just not aero to the degree I wanted, and it just didn't look as smooth. So for me, it had to be a one-piece arm, and it had to be smooth. It had to kind of have good airflow, but you had to have maximum adjustability. So we had to have forward, rearward adjustment. You needed height angle adjustment, and you also needed inward, outward adjustment. So we developed, originally our bars had a blank plate. So if you look at the bottom of a bar, it's got a whole set of holes. The early bars were blank, and you would drill it to suit your bike. And we get a mechanic saying, look, I got $1,000 carbon bar here and you want me to drill a hole in it? No. So we designed a mounting system that allow you to bolt the bar on in a range of positions. These little slots here allow the bar to twist. So just with using some bolts, you can kind of adjust it completely. We have an adjustable riser, which goes from 10 to 25 degrees. So you've got the benefit of a perfectly ergonomic arm piece with almost infinite adjustment. So like from a speed point of view, our testing in Portugal showed our bar over poles and cups to be between 11 and 16 watts faster. And that was between 45 and 50 Ks an hour. So look, you know, not a lot of people are riding at 50 Ks an hour, but in the time trial world, a lot of people are. So you could say nominally 10 watts, and the feedback we get regularly is like, for instance, Aaron Borrell at Road CC, he did 225K personal bests at lower watts than what he did previously. So you know, you got to be saying it's more efficient.
Yeah.
So that's kind of, I think, a pretty simple upgrade. When you get to the custom one-piece bars, I think the only ones that really work well are the ones where the big brands are taking it into the wind tunnel and they're testing lots and lots and lots of different models, and they've got their sponsored athletes in the wind tunnel for a day or two, and they're spending, you know, like inordinate amounts of money to get a perfectly optimized bar, and that will be the ultimate. But I think you're talking, you know, 20-30 grand by the time you're finished. The 3D printed ones, well, I saw one a while ago from last year's Kona, 3D printed with a stainless steel rod down the middle. Now that thing must have weighed, I don't know, a kilogram or something, more than a kilogram. So there seems to be, sure, 3D printing allows you a lot of design flexibility, but it's extremely heavy because it's not very strong. You need a lot of plastic. One of the problems we see with, so if you go away from the sort of Ann Haugs and those people that are, and Charles Barkley are sitting in a wind tunnel with Cube, for instance, if you go to Joe Pro or Joe Top End age group, and he's bought a custom set, they're taking him on a static thing. They're basically doing a perfect mold of an arm in a static position. They're making a bar that's set in one orientation, one angle, etc. So we have one of our top New Zealand athletes throwing away a $5,000 titanium setup, and he's moving to our bars primarily because he wants some adjustment. You know, athletes' physiology changes. They might have a shoulder injury. They may want to, I mean, I fiddle all the time on my bike. I'm changing 2-3 times a season. I'm making little changes, little tweaks. And what we discovered, Nick, during our product development is you would start off, you'd build a bar that you would print a model, you'd put on the table and feel fantastic. So you'd go and you'd make a sort of more robust one. You'd put it on the bike, you get on the indoor trainer, and you start to put a bit more stress through the body and through the pedals. And you discover that you need a bit of a tweak on it. So you make the tweak, then you go and you make your first carbon prototype, you put it on the bike, and you go out on the road. And it's like, it needs a lot of change because now you got wind, bumps, steering, you go up a hill, you're grabbing differently. So our experience was that the bar we started off with, which sitting on a table in a workshop with a prototype felt fabulous, was significantly different to what we finished with. And then even when we finished, we still had to make adjustments in terms of width and length and stuff like that. So I'll give you a good example. One of our athletes is Caleb Noble in Australia. I think he's number 2 there. So Caleb jumped on the fit bike and they fitted him up perfect. He went home, he jumped on his trainer, he rode a bit, he made some adjustments, thought, no, that's perfect. He went out on the road, he came back, he said, I need another 20 millimeters forward.
Yeah.
Now, if he had spent seven grand or $5,000 on a custom set, it would be tough luck. So, like I think the only time that works is if you've got a factory rider, a factory athlete, and you're putting serious money in. Otherwise, I think you're probably spending a lot of money for nothing. It's not so, you see, a lot of those custom bars are very popular in time trial where 20, 30 minutes on the bike, you can live with it. Like my time trial bike setup, it's not actually comfortable because my arm's so narrow, but I can live with it for 20, 30 minutes. But when I'm setting up my bike with the tri bars, like I'm thinking, how do I ride for a couple of hours? It's completely different.
Yeah. Real quick too, in terms of adjustability, if you go to your website, fastttbike.com, it's crazy how in-depth you've gone within each bike manufacturer's current cockpit setup. You've had to do probably a lot of research because you've got a ideal setup for a Cervelo versus the Cube versus now the Ventum. Like you've got different bars for different shapes and sizes. You've got adapter pieces. You've got little hardware pieces that even once I got my bars, I realized I need another, 15 or about another 20 or 30 mil reach, especially since I took it to about 20-degree angle. And I want to get into kind of angle of the cockpit in eventually, but I think how long did it take you to have to figure out all the different setups for cockpits for bikes?
At the moment, we have 18 different adapters, which are direct bolt-on. So we've just done Q-Cycle, Cadex, Tri-Rig, Alpha One, Giant Trinity, Trek Speed Concept. We've just done all the profile design bars, even their funny little angled riser. And most of it has been organic. So like the biggest challenge was I built the original bars and I thought, this is great, people love it. But then people say, oh, how do I fit it to this bike? How do I fit it to that bike? And I quickly realized the real challenge is actually getting it onto bikes.
Yeah.
So one of our, like a primary vision and goal is to be able to bolt our bars on with relative ease to anything in the market. So we currently are developing a round bar bracket. So any bike with a round bar, instead of using the sort of supersonic brackets, you can just bolt ours on and bolt our bars on, no problem. We sell a lot of bars and setups to Cervelo S5 road users, like surprisingly. And the amount of emails we get from people with road bikes or one aero bars is just astounding.
Wow.
So, like most of it has been, we've had customers. I had a lobster fisherman in Nova Scotia send me his P3X cockpit. I had a guy loan me his brand new Trek Speed Concept for 11 days while he went on holiday. I had a guy in the States send me his Tri-Rig Alpha One monopost. I've had extraordinary good support from customers in terms of giving me the information. I mean, I can't get my hands on all those bikes.
Yeah.
And so, for instance, on Cadex, we worked with a Cadex dealer in Holland and one in Ireland. We got the measurements, we made a 3D prototype, we sent it to them, they test fitted it, they sent us back suggestions, which we incorporated, and now we've got an adapter that is like super, super nice for the Cadex. It's been a lot of work, but I think one of the things we've done is this is a universal adapter. So it gives you some forward reach. You can drill holes anywhere for mono or for twin. These fit our bar brackets, and that's an integrated BTA, 65 millimeter. You put the little spaces on, you can put a BTA. And we sell a lot of those for people, and all they got to do is measure the bolt holes, drill them, and they've got an adapter.
Yeah.
It's really simple.
Wow. So your design is 2 standalone left-right arm bars.
Yeah.
They're ergonomic to the wrist and the forearm, and a really strong pad, big pad over the forearm.
Yeah.
So a lot of variety there. Can you speak and this is just for my education, I've seen a couple bikes that have a single mono situation that shrouds the entire aero bar encasing.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that level of aero? Is that wind flow channeling through the arms disadvantageous versus having it blocked off?
I have a customer in Brazil who proudly sent me a photo of his FastTT bars. Him and his dad blocked it all up with carbon underneath. Look, I think from an aero point of view, being able to block it up underneath is good. I have a design already done, and I was starting to go down the prototype route of a fixed bar, which essentially you'd have kind of two of these and it's all built into one, and you have a console in the middle, which has got a bento box and it's got the computer and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
It comes back to that same point of adjustability.
Yeah.
And when you talk to all the athletes, and I say to all the pros, and what's the optimum arm width? And there's no arm width. So we just decided that's not really a game. There's other people that will do a custom thing. Some people stick a bit of duct tape around it, but there's no question.
Electrical tape.
Yeah. If you can reduce if you can improve the airflow, I mean, between the two bars, there's always airflow into the chest. It's unavoidable. So if you can reduce that, that is good. But bearing in mind on a tri bike, you've got the computer, you've got a bottle. It's not the most aerodynamically optimized cockpit. So I don't think it's as important as it might be in theory.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of CDA discussions about.
Yeah,
you've seen, everything 3D printed and taped up in the last 2 years more than anything ever. So that was my main reason for that question. But I think, to your point, comfort is supreme no matter what. I think I've seen athletes still crush it on bars or pads and poles. I don't.
exactly.
And it might.
There's lots of top 10 guys doing that. Lots
Yeah.
of top 10 athletes running cups and poles.
Yeah.
I think if you look at the speeds, like obviously the faster you go, the bigger the aerodynamic gain or loss. If you take the pros and you maybe doing sort of 40 plus, depending on what distance, aero is obviously really important. When you're on a time trial bike, you're doing 50 plus, 55, it's super critical. If you're an age grouper and you're doing sub 35, it's a lot less. So I think, like, maybe once you've got the perfect setup, you go and make a piece of carbon or piece of cardboard or whatever you want to put to make it block up, do it. Fine. If it makes you feel better.
Yeah.
Of course, then you want to change it. If you've locked it up with carbon, you're buggered. So I think that's probably chasing unnecessary. I mean, it's gains. It's gains.
Yeah. Garrick's probably trying to get those gains.
Yeah, I'm totally guilty of the duct tape.
Yeah.
with the poles and pads. I had contemplated just using a piece of like pre-preg carbon fiber and putting that in there, but I did the duct tape and I just stuck with it and I put all my gels in there and everything and it worked great. So your idea with the bento box is a good idea. And then kind of just going back to the guys with the custom aero bars where they just sit there and they get a shape capture of them here and then they put it on their bars. I'm glad you touched on that because I laugh at that. So I work in prosthetics and this is exactly what we do, right? We do a shape capture, we do temporary device testing device. It takes us 6 months before, minimum before we move and do a carbon fiber finish. And we always joke like, okay, we fit you today on the magic floors, but you go home and in an hour you're gonna have an issue, right? And we got to do a modification and we're chasing the changes because anytime you start loading something, your anatomy naturally has pressure points that you can't compensate for when you're not doing it for an extended period of time.
An interesting one is the hand angle.
Yeah.
So we, like you sit there and you say, oh, that feels really great. You get out on the road and you start putting pressure, and what happens? You start gripping, and that happens. And I see, we got some athletes, they do this. I say, well, you wasted your time buying an aero bar because you may as well just get a cup and pole. But that's the first thing that happens. So if you've just sat relaxed and you've built your bar, and then you get on the road, and as you tighten it, you do that because you're on bumps. Well, there's $7,000 down the tubes.
Yeah.
Ours, obviously, you can't change that, but we try to build it so that it kind of fits most people. I mean, in the end, we all have an arm that looks like this. Some are a bit longer, some are shorter, but remember, there's a lot of soft tissue, which actually will fit into a lot of shapes. So while the beauty with prosthetics, which is theirs is an aerodynamic prosthetic aerobar, basically, it's got your vein and your hair and your blemish. That's not that important because once you put your arm on the bar, it molds to the bar. The soft bits mold. So I think some of the value proposition behind custom molding is a bit of, it's not really as valid as it might seem.
The wrist thing too, I've noticed, you know, you can trim that down because even for me, I may have to take a couple of mil out of that just because it does give me a little bit of a reach that I'm looking for if I am feeling fatigue. So there's things within your bar that you've thought of too that are adjustable even within just one composite. It's great.
That bar end, I mean, in our installation guide, we have a section that says trim the bar end, and a lot of people don't. So I still have the old DR2 that's a big long shifter, and I trim my bars down about that far so that the shifter sits there and my hand is nice. But I see some people just popping it in and then they got a big piece of the shifter sticking out the top. It's not aero.
Yep.
It's like you don't see anyone with a steerer tube on their bike sticking out 6 inches.
Yeah.
Someone cuts the steerer tube off. This is no different.
So Wayne, I would like to get into your perspective too on the angle of the cockpit. Have you seen diminishing gains at a certain angle? Have you seen stuff that's optimal? Because what you're effectively doing is you're kind of shielding the chest, but you're almost limiting your turning radius and your control, but also there's a fine line there. Have you seen anything on that for a good position, range of angle?
Coming from the time trial world, the UCI had a 15-degree angle limit, so that pretty much did it. They've now changed to 30, which people think is a target. And I try and tell them the UCI are not trying to help you aerodynamically. They're just putting a ceiling. The most popular is like our angled riser at neutral is 17 degrees. And most people ride around that. When we get someone at 25 degrees, it's a bit unusual. Our testing in Portugal, we tested from 10 to 25 degrees. Below 10, you're wasting your time. It's just slow. People don't want to hear this in the triathlon world, but the fastest was between 10 and 15 degrees. There's a gradual deterioration in CDA as you went up to 25. Not massive. I mean, you'd be at 25, you're not going to be a slug. But what happens is the primary thing is people are saying, I want to close this gap, which is fine. But what happens is the further you go up, the bigger the block you create here. So you start scoring here, losing there.
Yeah.
So there's definitely an optimum. And the other thing is if you're at 25 degrees, you're hanging on for dear life. You've got gravity against you. So at the end of 5 hours, your fingers, you can hardly open them. So you have to find a position that you're comfortable with. I think aerodynamically, certainly, anything from 10 to 8, like we like to design our bars around the 17-ish mark. That's where they sort of optimized. And that, I ride it at that angle and it feels nice. But if you're going a lot steeper than that, I think gravity starts to work against you.
Yeah, and it depends on the reach and the torso length of the customer too. I mean, that plays a big bargain into it, I suspect.
Yeah, yeah.
And is there any ergonomic benefit to that 17 degrees where you're not, like you said, you're not hanging on, you're not reaching, you're kind of able to just lay your forearms down, or?
Well, I mean, in terms of if it's comfortable for you, it's comfortable for you. Some athletes, the old school was 0 degrees, and I don't know if you've ridden at 0 degrees, but it's hellishly uncomfortable.
Yeah.
You feel like you're sliding off the front of the bike every time you brake. I think you've got to really just look and say, like our philosophy in design is to say, how do we get a rider in his most natural, comfortable position on the bike that he doesn't have to grip it, and he can sit in that position, put out the power without, or he or she without having to contort the body. And for some people, a steeper angle feels better. Some, it's a lower angle. I mean, the trend is obviously to higher angles and more, like we sell a huge amount of forward reach extenders. Everyone wants to hang over the front wheel. You suffer a bit on handling, but like obviously it opens the hips. And when you don't have a restriction between the front of the saddle and the bottom bracket, it's beautiful. You're lying basically on top of the bike.
Yeah.
But I'd say for people to experiment, and that's the beauty with this, is you just, oh, try it like this, try it like that. Mid-ride, you can just stop on the ride and go make a change if you really want it. So I say there's no real ergonomic answer to what is better. I would say over 20 degrees gravity could be a contributing negative factor.
Yeah, I think I've run mine between the 15 to 20, and I think in between that is where I felt most comfortable, to where I wasn't reaching out as much, but I do like to rake my arms out a little bit more. So it was right up my alley. Have you had to find? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but have you found any difference for men and women when it comes to the length of bar that you've created? Are you going to have to adjust for a smaller stature, or something different for the women's anatomy at all?
I'll tell you something really weird. For every 20, 30 bars we sell, maybe one goes to a female athlete. Sadly.
Okay. We got to change it.
We have some fantastic female athletes on our bars, and I talk to them and I say, like, why do more female not take it? And I sort of thought maybe partly there's well, I'm a female and I don't want to go to the bike shop and they think I'm, not technical, blah, blah, blah. But a response I got was that a mother feels like her first priority is home, children, stuff, and shouldn't spoil herself on toys. Men decide when there's money left over from the toys, we'll give it to the kids and the family. So I think it's a bit of a philosophical issue. I would love to see it different. So we have some fantastic, we've got a world champion on our bars. We got the Indonesian female champion, and they love it. As far as length is concerned, I have to say that our bar is probably built more for the medium to larger athlete. I am this year going to build a kind of a shorter bar we're doing some ergonomic sort of referencing and data capture. And I think we will build a kind of a medium-sized bar that will be more suited to kind of a smaller athlete. But we've got small, petite females on our bars, and they have no fit problems.
That's great. How about price point too, Wayne? I mean, for what you are offering, the level to entry for these higher end bars right now, I mean, let's face it, your product is on the higher end look, it feels great, but you're not overcharging and really doing some damage. What led you to that price point? Well,
it's $995, call it $1,000 US roughly, which is quite in line, coincidentally, with quite a lot of those sort of carbon systems. Obviously, poles and cups, you can't make a comparison. Then you've got multiple thousands when you go to the custom. I mean, it just really relates to what does it cost you to develop and tool and build these bars, bearing in mind that every single bar is handmade. It's not like if you do an injection molded or a 3D printed thing, you press the button and more come out the end, and so your cost per unit drops. If I order 100 bars or 1,000 bars, the bike cost it's the same amount of work, same amount of carbon, same amount of manual effort. The supplier might feel kindly and say, I'll give you a discount for because you give me good business, but it's a very, very labor intensive process. Every bar is handmade. So it's not a cheap product to make. Carbon fiber is expensive. The development, design cost, the testing, prototyping, tooling. It just came down to, like, what is it going to cost us and what can people tolerate? We try to say, well, let's make it affordable. That, it's less than the cost of going to Kona, the entry fee. It's less than the cost of entry fee. And when you're paying 25, 30 grand, or you're paying, the kind of money people are paying for a set of Princeton Carbon Works wheels, it's a cheap investment for being comfortable.
Yeah.
But it's not cheap. I mean, in the end, it's not cheap. It's a high-end product. But we're seeing, like last year, our sales were 5-fold increased. And we thought that the end of the Northern Hemisphere summer and the end of the race season would be kind of the end of our sales season. October, November, the two biggest months we've ever had. December matched the best month we had during summer. So, people are taking to it, and these are from pros right through to 11-hour age groupers.
Yeah, I think that more than anything, I wanted to give you, some kudos for your price point. I think it's definitely something anybody who's looking for actual comfort and gains, most importantly, comfort and then gains. I think that is a prime directive to invest in this, especially when your bike is already X amount, and everything else you're investing in. Helmets don't merely make you that much more comfortable. This product is designed to substantiate your comfort by a large load. So that's really where I felt like this was great. And especially, it's not like the most rigid, concrete position. Like the bars, when you do go over some bumps, there is just the slightest good amount of bounce that I've found that it doesn't make me feel hesitant. It doesn't make me feel like I can't handle well, but it gives my body a bit of a break. So I think that that's something I really enjoyed also with the product.
I think that's quite an important part of comfort. Like I ride an older Cervelo P5 and it's very stiff and it really kicks you in the butt on bumps. The bars, especially coming through your hands, your shoulders, into your neck, into your head, carbon fiber will always flex no matter how stiff you make it. But they stiff enough to give you complete comfort and control. We test them in Germany to ISO 4210 standard, which is what the UCI require, and it's just a good standard. And our current tri-bar, we take them to failure. So we put force on the end of it until the bar fails. And usually what happens is it cracks a little bit here, never breaks, you just get a crack there. And that's what we would describe as failure point. So we took it to 4.5 times the required limit. And we were using it on an aluminium base bar with a stem, and the stem kept turning in the bracket in the mount that they had. So essentially, if you put a 90 to 95 kilogram person, mount the bar over there, put a 95 kilogram person to sit on the end, you can probably ride them down to the corner shop and back. Any concern? So there's strength with a right amount, and they're still light. So it's just a matter of how you lay the carbon and manufacture it.
I've got a funny story. And Challenge Salinas in Ecuador, they kind of diverted the bike course the day of because of some extenuating circumstances. And we take this hard right turn. I get right in aero, it's downhill, and it's hard to see, but there's these vehicle destroying speed bumps, like big round ones, not the short abrupt ones. And I got air in aero and I landed, and I was certain I was going to crash, but it just kept on trucking. So that was a really good test.
I used to play ice hockey, and when you hold an ice hockey stick, it's extremely stiff. But if you have a look at a player taking a slap shot, that stick looks like a piece of spaghetti. Carbon can be very stiff, but it has an extraordinary ability to withstand stress. So we won't break. We've got some big athletes. I mean, we got some athletes sort of taller than 1.9, and we've got a couple of age groupers that are on the heavier side, 90 plus kilograms. No hassles.
That's awesome.
That's a great analogy with the hockey stick, because like most people who ride carbon bikes, they're so afraid of just any movement in the bike or anything. They think the carbon's going to break because they hear all these horror stories. But with a stick, like you grab those and you just lean on them.
Yeah.
And there's so much flex. Even like you can get a 90 flex stick and just like really lean on it and flex it, and you're like, it's not breaking. I mean, they do break, obviously, you see it happen all the time, but like, there's no give, and carbon doesn't fatigue too, right? It always bounces right back. So it's not like aluminum.
If you go and Google Brett Hull taking a slap shot, Brett Hull from 15 years ago, his stick was bent like a U. I guarantee you he was using an 85 or a 95 flex stick. So I mean, you see, the thing is, it's interesting because I think a lot of the mindset has gone to stiffer frames, and people have got this obsession with a stiff bottom bracket and everything, which when you're on a track bike and you're putting out 2,500 watts, you need a stiff bike. When you're on a pursuit bike, you need a stiff bike. When you're on a time trial and short, you're probably putting out more power. And when you hit a hill, you're going hard. When you're on 180K like St. George, and you hit a hill, the last thing you're thinking of doing is getting out of the saddle and pounding out 450 watts. So the stress that a tri bike goes through, I believe, a frame is completely different. And in some respects, I think maybe they engineered to be too stiff, which makes them less comfortable. I know my P5, it's very stiff, and it could be so much softer without compromising the ability to put the power down.
I agree. I think wheels have also evolved to be less stiff or just stiff enough to not flex under load, because some of the carbon rims with the or the aluminum rims with the carbon fairing, they do roll a lot softer. And that's
Yeah,
almost a selling point for companies like Head, I
absolutely.
think, sometimes.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of different comfort level things. Industry's been changing and our opinions have been changing, but all in all, like, anyways, it's all good lessons learned. But Wayne, thank you so much for giving so much of your time. But before we go, what has this inspired you to do now? And Garrick, also, any other final thoughts from you after this question?
Well, the fun part for me is design. I get a lot of feedback from customers. We take it in, we try and incorporate that. The excitement is building products that solve new problems or problems that aren't currently properly solved. I think we're starting to get into the mainstream where we're getting a lot of very good athletes like yourself and Jackson and Mark, and it's going to be exciting to see them doing some big races this year and getting some results. I mean, there's just so much we want to do. We're working on a base bar at the moment. We've got another tri bar in the works. I've got a frame in the works. I've got wheels in the works. I've got adapters in the works. Like, this week alone, we listed 6 new products on, basically launched 6. They're adapters, but it's all fixing a problem that exists that no one is properly fixing. So we've got a lot of exciting work to do, and then we've got partnerships with a range of people, and it's just exciting to get an email back from someone that says, like, I used to be in the marketing business, and you do a logo and a brochure, and no one ever wrote to you or emailed you and said, hey, look, that brochure has been amazing. I've sold so much stuff. They say, like, but didn't I pay the bill? Well, what are you on about? I get people just randomly sending me emails saying, thank you so much. Like, the bars have been so great. It's changed my experience. I'm having my best bike leg, blah, blah, blah. It's just satisfying. It's just really, from a designer's point of view, it's very gratifying. And that's kind of where I see it. It's not a commercial gain. This is like a fun business for me.
It's incredible. Thank you for that.
Yeah, man. Thanks for coming on. It's really cool to hear that you played hockey. Was that in New Zealand?
It was my whole family's a hockey family. My son, my middle son has just been. Well, we don't play in the highest league. We play Division 2, but my son is going to Bulgaria in March to play the Worlds for New Zealand. So he's played for the Ice Blacks for many years. My eldest son played for South Africa, and my daughter played for New Zealand. So we have a very vested. I just got too old for ice hockey and decided bikes was better.
Well, yeah, I feel like that's the natural progression, is like you play hockey and then you move into cycling. That's what I did. And
cool, man.
it's
who's your
natural,
team?
But
who's the team you support?
Oh, the Maple Leafs.
Yeah. Well, look, I have a lot of family in Vancouver, so the Canucks are a good one. But
okay,
I used to be a big Jerome McGinley fan back in the day.
Oh, yeah, me too. I was all Calgary. I was all Calgary, and then the Phaneuf came in, and I love Phaneuf, and then he moved to the Leafs, and then I just ended up as a Leafs fan. I didn't even pick it. It just happened
you would have been a Ty Domi fan.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I actually played against his son quite a bit growing up.
Okay.
Well, but at least Garrick has just gotten used to just always being disappointed, and that's the biggest thing he's learned, is being a Leafs fan.
Yeah, that and a Lions fan, unfortunately, but Michigan won the national championship.
The Lions just freaking nailed it, and so did Michigan in against whatever, I can't remember, but anyway,
against Washington,
crushing it.
But
I'm from Michigan.
Yeah, we don't talk enough hockey on this podcast. I always try, but the guys always shoot me down.
Yeah, I think we've talked enough for the whole year now. Well, Wayne, thank you so much for your support. We're certainly looking forward to new products, innovation. We'll have you back on in probably next quarter to see what you're up to. But until then, and thanks for doing it. And anything you need to know about Wayne and FastTT Bike, we will put it in the show notes. You can see it on our YouTube channel. If you've seen this video, you'll have it in the notes too. So give him some support and feedback, obviously. you can send to us and we can connect you with Wayne.
Sounds good. Nick, thanks very much. Appreciate the opportunity. And Garrett, good to meet you. And
Yeah, you too.
keep supporting that team wishfully.
Yeah. Next year is our year.
All right, fellas. Well, thanks again, and
Okay, guys.
All right, man.
out.
Thanks a lot, Wayne.
Cheers.